Ruth and Boaz. This story starts with harvest time. Now you have to understand that harvest time is not the same as it is in my area, which is the fall. No. Harvest time in Israel is in the spring. Summertime is hot. Absolutely no rain at all, which means the soil becomes like a rock. Then you have the fall, which is the early rains. That softens up the soil and is the time to plant. Then you have winter time, which is the latter rains, and that's when the crops grow. And finally, in the springtime is harvest. The family clan definitely felt responsible for Naomi. But you have to understand, there are certain issues going on here. Her family has taken the wealth of the clan and wasted it. Their family is kind of like the prodigal son. They went away wealthy, came back poor. That's not just family wealth, that's clan wealth. And on top of that, she brings back a Moabite daughter-in-law. There were some issues. Ruth had to prove herself. She had to prove the worth of not only herself, but also of Naomi and her judgment. So she worked hard. She was a hard worker. This is personal. This shows her value as a person. Along with that, she did not flitter away time looking for a husband, rich or poor, but worked hard. And she took care of Naomi. In a sense, that's taking care of a clan member. She's working for the clan right here, the family issue. So she is proving herself. She may not have known what was going on, but Naomi did. She knew that everyone was watching, and she knew the character of Ruth and knew that she would prove herself and be accepted by the clan. Now, timing's everything, and Naomi knew that. Harvest time. At the end of harvest, that's when everything happens. The whole year moves around harvest time. At the end of harvest, there's money. They have worked the land, they have sowed the seed, they have harvested, they now have money. This is the time to settle up. Settle up any debts, to reconcile whatever needs to be reconciled, also the time to negotiate. So Naomi was waiting for this, and this was the time. Now there needed to be a clan leader that would take on responsibility for this. The first clan leader rejected that whole thing, so Boaz. Boaz, as a clan leader, he wanted to make things right. First of all, he wanted to make things right for Naomi. But in addition to that, it was up to him to accept or reject Ruth. Who better than Boaz? Boaz is a descendant of Rahab, the prostitute who was a Canaanite. Boaz himself was part Canaanite, and now he was more than willing to accept Ruth, who was a Moabite. We can tell a few things about Boaz. One, he put a high value on family and a high value on land. He was a landowner himself. He knew the rightful place of land as far as the culture where he lived. He also felt responsible for Naomi. Right enough, she had to prove herself. Right enough, there were issues. But once these were resolved, he felt responsible. And we can only assume that he also had a growing love for Ruth. Well, the question is, when did Ruth die? You may not ask yourself that question, but I have. I went to Israel and I started doing some poking around and some research, and I found some interesting things. There is a little bit of Jewish tradition, not much, that says that Ruth was still alive as David was growing up. I wanted to see if I could find some of that. And lo and behold, I went to Hebron, and there is the traditional burial site for Ruth. Ruth and Jesse. I had to do a little bit of thinking and figure that thing out. Why wasn't she buried in Bethlehem? That's where she was from. That's where her family was. Why was she buried in Hebron? Well, David, as he was running away from Saul, he became fearful for his family. So he took his family, his parents, and if great-grandma was still alive, her too, took them across that shallow part of the Dead Sea over to Moab. And because of David's Moabite history, the king of Moab was willing to accept in the family. And I think Ruth was right there, right among them. Because later on, Saul dies, and David becomes the king of Judah, and his capital was Hebron. At that point, he brings his family back and doesn't take them back to Bethlehem, but takes them to where he's at in Hebron. And in that 7-year period, I believe that's when Ruth died, when David was 30 years old. She died. And Jesse also died, and both of them are buried right there before David moves on to Jerusalem, which meant that David heard this story from Ruth herself. Come back when we give you more insights on the story.